recently I was on my walk and I was talking to Spirit, and I had this thought about a slingshot, like a metaphor about a slingshot came into my head again. And I had recently channeled something about a slingshot in like a little random piece of poetry that I wrote one night. And I saw this little stick that looks like a slingshot. And I felt like it was some kind of sign about me slingshotting into the future, because that's part of how this keeps showing up to me, is like slingshotting my dreams and myself forward. So I brought it home and I put it on my altar to remind me of this experience and to remind me of this message that I keep getting. Hello, friends. It is I, Gray, your digital high priestess, once again. And today, I figured I would just channel and see what happens. Because one thing that I'm noticing is that I feel dead and lifeless until I tap into my genius, connect with the Godself, and just start channeling from that archetype. Until I tap into the most alive and aligned part of me, the part that I've been creating hyper sigils and all sorts of magic spells to try to bring into reality, until I tap into that part of self and just start drawing their energy into present reality, I don't feel good. I feel bored with myself. I feel bored with life. I feel disconnected from my purpose. I just feel like I don't know what I'm doing and there's no point to anything. And whenever I was like going through this last year, I've been going through this sort of for the last 2 years, trying to figure out, how do I maintain my most alive embodiment? How do I connect to that part of me that feels excited about life, excited to create, and remain connected to them? Because I would go through these periods where I really felt connected to them. And I felt motivated to do all of the things that I want to do. And then all of a sudden, it just disappears. And all of a sudden, I don't feel like doing any of that stuff anymore. And I can't even remember why I wanted to do it. And all I feel like doing is like sitting on my butt and like mindlessly scrolling Instagram and watching TV, and I just feel worse and worse as the day goes on. I feel more and more miserable, more and more drained. And I just kept wondering, like, what is happening? Like, how did I feel so sure of what I wanted to do, so sure of what I enjoy doing, what motivates me, what excites me, like a couple days ago, a couple weeks ago, whatever. And all of a sudden now it's just gone. And I just feel awful, and I feel confused, and I feel like, what is the point to anything all over again? And in my attempts to get to the bottom of this, I tried a bunch of different things. I learned all of these new exercises, many of which you will find in my book, Birthing the Godself, if you are familiar with me over on Substack. And I found that a lot of these are very helpful for getting in contact with the Godself. But the thing was, at the time, I was engaged in another project that I thought was going to lead me to doing what I wanted to be doing. But I had convinced myself, and this person that I was working with had convinced me, that I had to do this thing first, that I had to do this other, more healing-centric work in order to create the audience that could later enjoy the work that I actually wanted to make. And at the time, this also made sense to me because I was very embroiled in healing work as well to try to stabilize my complex PTSD. I was still like in nervous system recovery from some really rough years, from a bunch of trauma like surging to the forefront of my consciousness, and me just kind of having all of this like stuff dumped on me, all of this childhood trauma that I suddenly needed to deal with. And I was convinced that the reason that I was struggling so much to remain connected to my desire and to remain connected to my genius and to embody the God self was because I still needed to heal my trauma. But it's only whenever I gave up on the project of healing my trauma and started focusing on just creating art of the God self, even if it didn't get to go anywhere, because, I was engaged in this other project. I felt a responsibility to be making work for this project, and I felt like my partner would not like it if I created another project of my own and just started putting all this stuff out, because they really wanted that stuff to go towards this project too, just in the future. This was a very confusing situation, I think, for both of us. But when I finally just decided, I'm just going to do this work independently, I will write all of these things and I will squirrel them away in my little journals and my little Notion databases for a future time when they're ready to come out, when they're ready to be published and revealed to the world. And I started to feel alive again. I started to feel connected to my purpose. I even started making a lot more work for the project that I was working on, because I started thinking like, okay, if I were to introduce an audience to the work that I ultimately want to do with creativity and spirituality and magic, how would I start priming them for those concepts now? What are the sort of building blocks of that work? So I was doing a lot of work for a couple months in there. I was really motivated by all of the creativity stuff I was doing and all of the stuff I was channeling directly from my genius and from my direct embodiment of the God self. And I was also making a lot of work for the project. And I started to feel connected to my purpose again. And I started to feel energized and alive again. And I had all of this motivation, all of this energy that I had no idea where it was coming from. I just knew all of a sudden I have all this desire to create and I'm just going for it and I'm getting shit done. And eventually, whenever I had to really start focusing on that project and start focusing on other things that we needed to get done in this project, that like we needed to deliver to the audience that we were already trying to build, I started getting sucked back down again. I started losing my motivation again, and I started feeling confused and disconnected and drained. And I sort of entered limbo for a few months before I finally decided it's time, I have to leave this project, and I packed up my shit and I left. And I started this new project, Over the Rainbow, my Substack, and all of the things that have coagulated around that now. And at first, again, I was really connected to my desire. I was really chugging along. But then all of these fears started creeping in, and all of this overwhelm at how my life was changing. Like the things that I used to enjoy doing, I no longer enjoyed doing. I now found that they made me miserable. And I really, like, my entire routine and my entire way of living changed. And it changed in alignment with what I had always wanted, with what I had been building towards for 2 years. I had wanted to build this sort of practice where I'm constantly creating and constantly channeling from spirit and constantly engage with my spirituality, which I see as being my creative practice. But it felt so new and different to my nervous system, so far outside my familiarity zone, that I had a sort of crisis. The parts of self inside me that were going to have to die in order for this new self to officially be born were freaking the fuck out. And I started intentionally disconnecting. And, intentionally, this was not a conscious choice. It was these parts of me. I was getting zapped back into these old parts who were causing me to disconnect from my God self, from this timeline that I was trying to bring forward, from my genius. And I started sort of like backing back into my comfort zone and backing away from all of this stuff that I was trying to do. And I kept wanting to reconnect and thinking, why can't I just reconnect with this part of myself? And the truth is that I wasn't ready to. I was not ready to channel from this part of self. I was not ready to embody this part of self. I wasn't ready to step into the new timeline that I was calling in. But finally, I hit this sort of breaking point around the Pisces lunar eclipse, where I was thoroughly tired of ignoring what I knew I really wanted to do. I was tired of neglecting my desire and suppressing my creative urges. And I was like, I'm just going to lean into the discomfort. And I'm going to forcibly reconnect with the God self. I'm going to forcibly reconnect with these desires. Because all of this time that I spent trying to figure out how to reconnect, the one thing that I was missing is that you have to just decide. You have to just decide to drop in and channel from that part of you. And one of the ways that I typically do this is through writing or recording videos, recording podcast episodes, dancing. I do like intuitive movement. I've talked at length about the various practices that I use to channel from this part of me. But none of it works unless you decide to surrender and decide to be receptive to this part. And in my experience, it takes some practice learning how to plug in. But all of the experiences that I've had over the last 2 years of trying to get in contact with this part of me and practicing surrender, even when I didn't quite fully get there, even when I felt like I was just kind of faking it and going through the motions, it got me to this place where now I regularly find that if I really want to, if I'm really ready to show up, I can turn off my brain, get into my body, and just drop in and start channeling. And in many ways, this has been very threatening to my ego because I tend to want to say things perfectly, do things perfectly, and really have a plan so that I know I'm going to be able to deliver on my vision, on the thing that I really want to make reality, the thing that I really want to create. But fully committing to this life of channeling from spirit by way of my genius has meant that I have to let go of being in control. It's meant that I have to sometimes even let go of making sense. I have to let go of my plan and what I think I'm supposed to show up and teach on a certain day or say or how I'm supposed to say it, and just let go and let genius come through. And I've had this experience twice over the last 2 weeks where I start writing an article and I think I know where it's going to go. I think I know what the plan is, but I'm channeling and all of a sudden it ends somewhere completely else. It takes a direction that I could not have predicted. And I find myself sitting there after the fact, I'm proud of this piece of work. I like it. But is it good because I didn't go with the plan? I don't know how to explain it. It's just I feel like this part of me doesn't trust how good it feels to just channel something and let it be what it is, and has to somehow make it wrong. And has to somehow pick it apart and be no, that can't be good because you didn't have a plan. You didn't consciously, intentionally create this. You did not create this from ego. So it's not yours and it's probably not good. You probably just dissociated and made some bullshit and you need to fix it. And I've had to, after looking at these articles and obsessing over what's wrong with them, but then I go through it and I'm there's nothing I would change, and having to accept that this is what it's supposed to be. I feel in my gut that this is what this was supposed to be. It has broken my brain. It has been an extreme challenge and an extreme exercise in trust. And today I was having another one of those days where I woke up and I felt tired. I felt disconnected from my desire. I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. I just felt like I was kind of aimlessly drifting through my day. I did a bunch of chores and then I did some editing, and then I was okay, what now? What do we do? And I knew in my gut that I wanted to record a YouTube video today. But I was so distracted by the fact that I felt so tired and I felt so bored, and I wasn't convinced that it really sounded good, even though it felt in my gut like the right thing to do. Even though I even pulled some tarot cards, just maybe let's just make sure this is what we're supposed to be doing today. And they were hell yeah, go for it. I still was just I'm disconnected from my God self. I'm not in that timeline. I'm not in that part of myself that wants to do these things. And so I'm not convinced that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I kind of just want to lay in bed and rest. But then I know from all of these experiences I've had lately of believing that I needed to rest because I felt tired, and then that making me feel worse. And then other days when I think that I'm tired and need to rest, and instead I plug into the God self and start channeling, I feel energized. Like all of a sudden I feel really excited about everything and like really excited to just make more. Like I had this experience, I can't remember if it was like this week or last week. Yeah, it was last week whenever I was recording a podcast. I showed up to record this podcast and I thought like, I am not in a good place to do this. I'm not going to be like my typical chipper and entertaining self. I feel dead today. Like no one wants to listen to this part of me. But as soon as I showed up and started talking, my old like gregarious bubbly self came out and I felt all excited and all energized and I had so much to say and I recorded what I think is a bomb podcast episode. And afterwards I felt so energized that I feel like I need to get more done. Like I turned on my sacral, I turned on my erotic energy, I plugged into the God self and I just felt like a new person. And these like experiences are what I'm talking about when I talk about like reconnecting to your desire, reconnecting to your purpose, just plugging in and channeling. Like you have to get yourself there sometimes. Like sometimes you don't feel like you want to do the things that you know deep down you want to do because you're not plugged into the right timeline. Maybe you're plugged into these old parts of self that are feeling frustrated with life because everything's changing or because like other parts are trying to pull them in a different direction. And of course, they need your support to show up to that. You can't just like suppress those feelings and pretend it's not happening. I have to sort of like be present with these parts of self and hold their hand to get them across the threshold. And I have to really make space to feel their feelings as I go. Like whenever I was setting up all of the equipment to do this video, I started noticing more and more, I felt myself starting to plug in and I felt the energy start flowing. All of a sudden, like I didn't feel tired and draggy anymore. And I started to feel like, no, this is going to be fun. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what I have to say today, but I'm sure it's going to be fun. And then like, I was like talking to these parts as I was going. I was like, see how good this feels? You can trust this. And if at any point this feels bad, if at any point you're like, no, stop, I can't do this, like, just ring the bell and I will be there and we will stop and I will honor your boundaries. But like right now, while this is feeling good, don't you want to keep going? And like once I show these parts that like, yes, this does feel good, yes, this is what I want to do, then they're like all on board. They're like, absolutely, let's do it. One way that I practice staying connected to my God self, staying connected to my genius, is I carry a pocket notebook. I have two main notebooks besides like my Notion ones. I have my hypersigil journal, which is where I do the majority of my work. I do like a variety of things in there, some like future journaling. I write about my various experiments and practices and rituals and how that's going. I do like a little alchemical check-in to sort of process how I'm in alignment with my goals and what I'm doing to reduce my reliance on draining coping mechanisms and habits. But my pocket notebook is really just for inspiration. It's for random shower thoughts. It's for checking in with my genius and really feeling into my God self, feeling into that creative archetype of self channeled from all of my most beautiful and effective timelines, and really practicing embodying them. And like the most important part of this practice is that I can't judge what comes out. I can't decide like, well, that's a dumb thought, I'm not gonna write that down. Or that's not very important, I can't imagine I'll ever want to read that back later. Because the point is not reading it back. The point is giving it physical weight. The point is giving it life in physical reality. It is a literal magic spell to write down these ideas that come from this magical part of you that you're trying to embody, and this like beautiful timeline that you're trying to call in, and giving them a physical body. So when I was getting ready to record this video today, I was like, I don't really know what this is going to be. I'm just kind of showing up on camera to say whatever. Maybe I should like read a little bit from my pocket notebook. Maybe if I did some like bibliomancy, some divination, flipping through the pages of this pocket notebook, there's something that wants to be said. So I did 3 different polls, and the first one was very revealing because it's everything that I am working with right now and exactly what I've been talking about in this video, which is that I wrote in March, I am committed to expanding my capacity to live every day in my dream world. I use future journaling to practice feeling the good, the bad, and the ugly. Truth from all perspectives. Practicing being in all times, in all places at once. Singularity, synchronicity. Because at this time, one of the realizations that I had is that the things that I think I want, the dream reality that I want to call in, it's going to have scary things associated with it. It's going to bring its own bad situations, its own detractors that maybe part of me is really avoiding. That maybe that's like a real sticking point preventing me from wanting to call that reality in. So I practiced feeling into these like scary parts of my desired reality and writing about my current reality and all of the sticky points coming up there, all of my resistance, all of my fears and worries from a future perspective where I've already dealt with those things, where it's already worked out, where there's nothing to worry about. And I don't have to force myself to trust because it's already happened. And that really helped me tap into trust. And getting this future perspective on my current reality really was the most interesting and I think effective part of this practice, because it helped change how I was relating to the present blocks and difficulties in my life. And it helped me not to see them as so oppressive and something that was happening to me, and instead see it as something that I'm co-creating. And part of this beautiful co-creation is all of these really difficult, gnarly things. That it's like we come to this reality, we come to dualistic reality to feel contrast, to feel the entire range of sensation. If we didn't want that, we would just stay in the field of oneness. We would just stay in non-dual reality where we're part of the collective consciousness. But no, we come here to feel all of the shitty things. So I was like, how can I tap into the aesthetic value of the shitty things? How can I change how I relate to my blocks in this like moralistic good and bad, purity and impurity sort of way, and instead see their artistic aesthetic value? The next part that I divined from my pocket notebook reads, "You are destructive to what came before you because this is the nature of reality, to be constantly creating a top demolition." And this is something that I think about a lot, because one thing that I found in trying to bring about my dream reality is that there are things that you wouldn't expect to miss once you end up in a better place. Like, I was realizing all of the things from like my traumatic past that are bittersweet, sometimes even excruciatingly so, but I still look back on with a fondness and with an appreciation for their aesthetic value, with an appreciation for the beauty in that experience. And when I really connect to the value of that experience, I understand why parts of me don't want to bring in my future timeline, who don't want to change our present reality, because they are still connected to what's beautiful and valuable about it, and I'm refusing to appreciate it. So one of the best things I can do to build goodwill with these parts of self is to appreciate the aesthetic value of the good and bad of my life right now. Like, unfortunately, my future timeline, my archetype of the Godself, is threatening and destructive to certain parts of me that are attached to what's happening right now. And the best way I can help them cope with that grief is by making space for it. I don't have to wait until the future reality comes in to feel my grief about what's changing and what I'm leaving behind. I can feel that now. I can make space for that now. And preempting that a little bit, not in a forced way where you're forcing emotions, but actually being able to connect with that grief ahead of time, it just reduces obstacles and reduces friction in getting you to that dream reality. And the last thing that I divined from my pocket notebook, which also feels very appropriate to the thesis today, is the older I get, the less I care about perfect execution or technical prowess. I care about an original personal idea and style. I want to be fascinated, enraptured. I want to feel something. And I was writing this about like some of the movies that I've liked recently and some of the ones that just haven't hit for me. And one thing that I was specifically thinking about is like, I really love the director Osgood Perkins' work. Even though Longlegs was very imperfect, I still really enjoyed it because I just think that he has such impeccable style and he really has like such a specific vision. You can really tell that he is tapped into something physically. He is physically embodying his desire and that vision that he wants to bring into reality. It is personal to him. It is alive. It is a visceral thing. And that is what makes his movies so exquisite to watch. Like, I even liked The Pretty Thing That Lives in the Attic. I'm not sure many people have heard of that movie. I think it was like on Netflix. And like that movie is hella imperfect, but I couldn't help it. Like against my will, I just loved it because I was able to tap into his vision because he was so viscerally tapped into his vision. And it really has made me think lately because a lot of the stuff that I have been sharing in various articles or sharing like little excerpts online has been from my pocket notebook, has been from my hypersigil journal, has been the rough channelings that normally I would look at and be like, that's way too raw to put out there. That needs some like editing, that needs some reworking. But it feels so viscerally alive to me that I can't help but see the beauty in it. And I can't help but see the rawness and the human imperfection as part of its appeal, as part of its beauty and its aesthetic value. And it's really made me change my priorities lately and stop trying to make work that I think is perfect and polished, and instead try to share things that feel alive for me. It's made me want to share things that feel personal, that feel a little bit raw, because I think that people can really tap into my vision when I allow myself to let those parts be seen. It's like sometimes maybe imperfections make it into your work because they're somehow part of the gestalt image. They're somehow part of the plan. It's part of that, like, you're channeling from spirit. You're channeling from your genius. You are channeling ideas that have yet to coagulate in idea form. They're still just frequencies out in the ether. And they might include pieces that once you begin trying to materialize them, feel like they don't fit. But maybe energetically they do. Maybe you just don't see the utility of that part of the vision. But maybe it's important. It's like sometimes whenever I look back at work that I've already finished and I'll notice like a little error, like something that I forgot to color in on a drawing, or like when I'm doing a little digital drawing, sometimes I'll see like a little like stray mark that got left in. And lately I've been trying to challenge myself to not go back and fix those things and to entertain the idea that maybe they were supposed to be left in. Like maybe they are actually part of the piece that I just can't consciously, cognitively understand.